Good evening, I'm Wendy Stapleton and welcome to Wrokdown. When we first started Wrokdown, we needed a name, a great name, for our first episode. But the perils of our industry had left legendary artists a bit wary about newcomers. Not many people wanted to know what artists were doing today. They were quite willing to cash in on their history, but we do care. New material is our aim, and one of the most persistent songwriters and the hardest working musician in the industry, again with us tonight. Would you please welcome Mr. Mike Rudd. The most persistent and hardest working. I don't know anyone that's out there doing more stuff than you.
No, I've kept going, and the band has kept going. So Spectrum is the band that I first started with, writing for, and it's still going.
It's still going
after 40 years.
40 years, can you believe that? And of course, you didn't come to Australia until
1966.
66? Okay, Christchurch boy.
Yep. I was probably my first venture into music was as a chorister with the Cathedral Choir, which, if you know Christchurch at all, it's dominated by the Cathedral and the Cathedral Square. And at a fairly late age, I was introduced to that and spent at about 11, and then spent the next 4 years with the choir, and then I kind of got jack of that whole organised thing and refrained from doing any formal music after that. But when I went to Christ College, I got into I started my own little band there as the kind of alternative dance band. I was a rebel even then, right from the very start. I went on from Christ College, I went on to art school, which is a kind of the 60s breeding ground for rock musicians. And I was very keen on the music thing, and at the end of the second year it became an issue, and I decided to opt for music rather than to persist with the art school thing. So I went on to become a full-time musician.
What actually sort of sparked the idea of coming to Australia?
Well, there was a bit of an adventure there, but the inspiration was seeing Max Merritt and his band, and I got more to know Pete Williams, who went on to play with the Groove later on, and he was a very affable man. I was a bit scared of Max even in those days, and but I really admired where they were coming from, because it was completely different from all the other Christchurch bands that I'd seen. And so I thought, oh, this is what happens when you go to Australia. The musical horizons open a bit. We arrived in Melbourne with the band, and 6 months later there was no band. We did a couple of things. We did we did Commotion.
Oh yeah.
Which was, of course, a
TV show.
A big mime big TV show. And
so what did you mime? Your own?
We did our own tune, yes, that had been released actually after we left New Zealand, which was a John Mayall tune actually, and he was probably my principal inspiration as far as the blues went, which was a kind of British blues slant on things. But that's where we were heading. But what kind of broke us up when we hit Melbourne was that we were actually too eclectic for the market, well, from our point of view anyway, and we did all sorts of things. We did Tamla stuff and blues things kind of pushed together, and that had worked okay in our regular haunt, but coming up with different audiences, it was a bit hard to absorb, so we felt we had to go one direction or the other. And you know, that's what split the band up.
So then, of course, you went on to work with, was it Ross Wilson and Ross Hannaford?
A couple of years with Ross and the Party Machine really did give me a shunt along as far as writing my own stuff was concerned, or inspiring me to write my own stuff. I only wrote one tune or a couple of tunes with the Party Machine. But when Ross decided to go over to England and the band folded, I thought that was a good idea to put my own band together around my own material, which I hadn't written at that stage. But Ross's had really inspired me to write my own stuff, and that's where I met Bill Putt and Mark Kennedy for the first time. I'd actually seen them playing in a band called The Gallery, which was they were backing up 3 girl singers, and I'd particularly been impressed with Mark Kennedy. I thought he was just a prodigious,
he's an amazing drummer.
Yes, and he was only about 16 at that stage, but just he was just an incredible drummer. So I thought, well, here's my first pick. And then after a few weeks of rehearsal, Bill joined up, and he initially joined as a guitarist. I was still playing bass at that stage, but then I kind of think, no, maybe I should go on to guitar, because I'm
with
writing
singing,
the stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the way that happened.
We'll take a short break, because when we come back, I'm going to introduce the audience to, I've never met an enduring partnership like you, and we're talking about, of course, your mate.
Oh, Bill Putt. Bill Putt.
Bill Putt.
Yeah.
So we'll be back after this break with Bill Putt.
Bill Putt.
Wrokdown.
Welcome back to Wrokdown. My special guest tonight is Mike Rudd, who was actually our first guest last year when we started Wrokdown, but we were in the little studio.
Speaking of closets, that was tiny.
That was tiny.
This is wonderful.
Isn't it wonderful? It looks fantastic, and we've got an audience.
It's like a Franco Cozzo set.
This is one of the producers' couches.
Well, you would know.
I don't get that. As we were saying before the break, not many people work together for something like
40 years.
40 years.
It's exactly like 40 years. You know what 40 years is? It's exactly like 40
years. Would you please welcome our special guest, Mr. Bill Putt.
This is your life, mate. No, thank you.
Did you bring the family in?
No.
40 years.
Yeah, on it's actually August the 15th. It'll be 40 years.
Could be.
Now, we've been talking about people not being able to get airplay.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about recent stuff, but back then there were certain reasons that you couldn't get airplay. And I have to ask you why some of your songs weren't given airplay, one in particular.
Well, I made a point, I don't know whether it was a conscious decision, but it was more or less because I was following the example of Ross Wilson. Ross Wilson had his Party Machine songbook banned at one stage, and whilst I didn't want to emulate that in particular, I admired the fact that he was writing about stuff that he believed in, and it wasn't just love stories or relationship type songs. And so I persisted with that idea and wrote about anything other than. And when it came to Ariel, the Spectrum band finished one week, and then a kind of month later, Ariel was playing its first gig with a completely new repertoire. So this material was born at a frantic pace and under a great deal of pressure. So that kind of actually pushed the direction of each song even further. So the first Ariel album, A Strange Fantastic Dream, had 3 or 4 songs on it that were a band for airplay immediately, and one of them was Chicken Shit, and And it was just an expression that I heard an American sailor come up with, and I thought, well, that's an interesting thing to write a song about. Just let's pretend that we're advertising this product, chicken shit. So that's the way the song kind of developed. And that and a few others. There was Confessions of a Psychopathic Cowpoke, which was...
Why was that banned?
Yes. Well, it was kind of into necrophilia and other things, but it was actually quite a satirical song. But if you weren't actually listening out for it, you could be lulled into thinking it was just a kind of country kind of song. But then you realise that these very subversive lyrics going on, and I'm still a little hesitant about playing it in case somebody takes it seriously these days. And as a matter of fact, we got hauled up on television to defend this the fact that these songs had been banned. And fortunately, John Pinder was on the same show, and he was one of the pivotal people behind the TF Much Ballroom and other, of course, The Last Laugh and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
And you couldn't shut him up, and you couldn't get me started. So he just did all the talking, and I was kind of glad because I didn't really know what I was going to say in defending myself. Because when you write these things, you don't think about being put in the position of having to defend what you write. But I can look at it now fairly dispassionately and say, well, some of these things were sort of fairly extreme and fairly challenging.
To continue that on is why we didn't get much airplay. Not long after the chicken shit incident was banned, we were doing a live show on another radio station, and Stan Rope was the main man there. And the area was set up in Studio 2 at Armstrong's. They had a live audience sitting on the floor. It was nationwide. And you do 45 minutes. You do a few songs, a few ads, a few songs. Michael and I are in the control room with our manager at the time. Stan Rope was there, engineers, people going around. I did not hear anyone say this, and Michael says he never heard anyone say this, but we were told there by Stan not to play chicken shit. So we go on and we do the first song, the second song, the third song. It's all going great. They go, okay, we're cutting to an ad break, which they did. They put all the lights on. We're all quite happy having a cup of tea and standing there ready. Okay, you're on, boys. And we started chicken shit. And we got just into the first bit of it, and suddenly all the lights went off. Everything just, you know what it's like.
They pulled the plug.
Pulled the plug.
Who pulled the plug?
And that was the end of the show. And
was it going live? Was it going live? Oh, it was going live. It was going live,
yeah. It was no tape. So after that, we had great difficulty getting airplay on those stations that were linked up with those people.
But it would have worked wonders for you, wouldn't it?
No, it backfired on us.
Did it?
We didn't, like, it was innocent. We didn't mean to upset anybody. You know, our manager came out furious going, what are you doing? What are you talking about? We didn't hear anyone say, do not play that song. Anyway, it made it very difficult for us to get airplay on XYSM and all that network.
For how long?
Forever.
You serious?
Yeah.
Stan Rofe is still pissed off.
Oh, I think he's dead.
The boys have just had a lovely meeting earlier today with the wonderful Judith Durham.
Oh, fantastic.
Who, as probably everyone would know by now, has rewritten the lyrics to Advance Australia Fair. So we could...
Really?
What could you do to I'll Be Gone?
Well, the first thing
One day I'll
make
meet Ernie.
it Sunday I'll have money, because Sunday has just been hanging over our heads forever, and we've never actually made any money.
Yeah.
But we've had a hell of a lot of fun in the meantime.
They say if you want something and you speak to the gods, you've got to be really specific. Sunday I'll have money is too general. You've got to say Sunday I'll have money. Sunday. And then the gods say, oh, they want money on Sunday.
You've got to watch the quiet ones, and you've got it all sussed out. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what you guys are actually doing at the moment, where you're playing.
Okay.
Be back soon.
Wrokdown.
Welcome back to Wrokdown. My special guests this evening, Mike Rudd and Bill Putt from Spectrum. You've released, as you said, or you're going to release.
Yes.
The plan is to release the 4 EPs. Tonight, when we started the show, I was saying that a lot of people are always ready and willing to cash in on your history. As I said, like especially things like "I'll Be Gone" back in those days, huge hits, still being played all the time. They use it on television, they use it on the radio, but commercial radio stations will very rarely play any new stuff.
Yes.
And you were saying,
yeah, you can go into these. You can go into these places with your stuff and say this is blah blah blah. Whether the music's great or not's irrelevant. They just go, oh well, it's not really. It doesn't fit our demographic. Well, when you look at us and our demographic, I said the other day at a gig, our audience are all grandparents.
But we're gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm not saying, yeah, but everyone, so we can't go to Triple J, who has an audience of, say, 25 down in years, and get them to play our stuff, because they know we're old guys and only old people listen to us. So you get the demographic word all the time. So
Okay.
the demographic radio station I listen to, because they cater for us old folk, is the ABC.
And will they play new material?
We've been on Derek's show a few times, and he's a lovely, generous...
He's great, isn't he?
He's great for
Derek,
for what he does for Australian music. And Stubbsy and all those people, they're catering well for it. But that's only the one.
And the community radio station.
Yeah, community.
Yes, well, community radio is fantastic.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear any of the new music, unfortunately, when I say unfortunately, it's not unfortunate, but you go to community radio or, as you said, the ABC. The one song, well, I know you're actually going to take us out with this song tonight. It is...
Well, Xavier Rudd is not my son. Yeah. I got, it was a few years ago at the Threadway Festival that this first happened, where a couple came up and asked me, said that they really liked the work of my son, and it perplexed me for a few minutes, and then I realised they were talking about Xavier Rudd, and I thought then, this has got to end up as a song, and eventually it did. And of course, when we go to Canberra, people ask me about Kev, so I have to refute that as well.
Have you written one about Kev?
Well, he gets a mention.
He gets a tackle on the end, yeah.
We'd like to thank everybody for being with us this evening, and the boys are going to take us out tonight with Xavier Rudd, Is Not My Son. Thank you and good night.
Here's not my brother, and Xavier's not my son.